Hello lovelies, how are you all doing today? I hope you're well. I'm okay, not great, but I'm going to try and get through this video without coughing too much. This annoying bug has got a little bit worse. A lot of the videos you've seen throughout January, I'd filmed quite a lot of them pretty much towards the beginning of January, thank goodness. Just because I was getting more and more poorly and coughing and horrible. Anyway, the fact is, a week or so ago, my doctor said, that's it, you have got to rest. Rest, I hate that, that's anathema to me. But, you know, I've been feeling pretty lousy, so I've been a good girl trying to rest. I'm trying to catch up on jobs that I've missed in January, but I'm being really sensible. So I might do a job for an hour and then 2 or 3 hours of this thing called rest. But I can't do nothing. I can't just sit and do nothing. I'm useless at that. So I've been reading. So I thought I'd bring you a bit of story time today. I'm going to share with you some of the books I've been reading, but also some of the sort of memories and stories they've prompted for me. So this might end up being a long one if I last. Maybe put the kettle on and get a nice pot of brew on the go. So first of all, I want to say, oh my goodness, the post. I'm still getting Christmas. Thank you. And Madeline, lovely letter, and thank you for your note, Madeline, and your wife Kaz. I do hope you can get back here before too long. Madeline is, well, they're in Australia, but her wife is from the UK, and of course, because of everything that's been going on in the world, not been able to get back to the UK for a couple of years. So, you know, we'll see. Maybe things will improve on that score before too long. So, yeah, like I said, I've been reading quite a bit. Now, some of these, I was going to talk about a couple of these the other day, and then I realised, because it was the day I was talking about my duvet cover. You know, I was saying about having spare duvet covers. Well, thank goodness, because, yeah, there have been a few nights when I've been quite poorly and needed to change the cover. Anyway, yeah, I was talking too much that day, so I didn't talk about these books. But yeah, let's have a little look at what I've been reading. The first one is such a treat. This was a book my second cousin recommended me it's probably about 3 years or so ago now. And, well, no, it wasn't, she didn't so much recommend it as, I think she'd posted about it on Facebook, and I saw it, I thought, oh, that's great, that looks right up my street. Made a note of it. You know, for someone who's organised, I ain't half disorganised. I promptly lost that note. And a year or so later, I was thinking, what was that book that Maggie mentioned? So I messaged her and I said, what was that book? And she told me. I was like, oh, yeah, that's it, brilliant. And then, completely flukily, it was on one of my trips. So I know this is at least, it's over 2 years, or it's about 2 years ago, because it's obviously before the pandemic, because it's before I was prevented from doing my weekly trips down to see my great aunt. I was on one of my trips to see her, and I take 2 trains. Now, the main train, there's only one an hour, so I do not want to miss it. So my little train that I take locally to get to that station to hook up with the main train, I always give myself loads of time because, yeah, I don't want to miss that other train. So quite often when I get to that town, I mean, a lot of you will know it, it's Bromley in Kent. I take the train from Bromley. I usually arrive at Bromley with 30-40 minutes to spare until that main train. So usually what I do is I duck out of the station for that half an hour or so, because just up the road there's an Oxfam, which is one of our charity shops, and it's got a really good book section. And I popped in there, and it can have only been days after getting back in touch with my cousin about this book, and they had it on the shelf. It's brand new, So it retails at £8.99. It's on the shelf brand new at £2.50, so I had to have it. And it is, look, it's got this, can I make it glisten and glint, this kind of, oh, there you go, you see the coppery effect. It's Lucy Mangan's Bookworm, a memoir of childhood reading. Some of you may know Lucy Mangan. She writes a column for The Guardian. I remember, oh gosh, this is going back years now, when I used to get The Guardian on a Saturday. In the colour supplement, she used to write an article. What was it? I can't even remember what it was about now. I didn't ever particularly like... I didn't have an issue with her writing, but her character, I didn't ever really warm to her character. However, I thought, well, I have to give this a go, a memoir of childhood reading. Oh my goodness, it's an absolute joy. It's such a joy. It starts with the really early sort of picture books that are the sort of books we look at on our own before we're readers, but the story is told to us by our parents, grandparents, what have you. And then it goes right through to the sort of teenage years and that cusp of that slight crossover of we're still reading our books which are aimed at young people, but we've also started to read adult books too. Oh, an absolute treasure trove of memories. As each chapter unfolded, I was thinking, I really hope you're going to talk about my favourite book from this sort of genre or this particular period. Sometimes she did this whole section on Sweet Valley High books, which shows, I think she's about 7 years younger than me, and it just shows that by the time all the Sweet Valley High stuff came out, I'd long since left my childhood reading behind. I was properly into adult reading by then. But, you know, things like Tom's Midnight Garden, just too much. All the obvious, Alice in Wonderland, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, so many. She also talks about the Pullen Thompson sisters, who wrote all the pony books, Jill's Gymkhana. It was an absolute joy, so I have absolutely no qualms recommending it for anyone who was a voracious reader as a child, as I was, who wants to just wallow in that glorious nostalgia. Just back to that point about when I used to read her column of thinking, you know, I liked her writing, but I didn't like her character. My only qualm with this book is, I don't know how to put it really. She does bang on quite a bit about the fact that, aren't I quirky, aren't I odd for being such a bookworm as a child? You know, it's like by the fourth or fifth chapter, yes, Lucy, we know you were a bookworm. You don't have to keep banging on about it. So I found that ever so slightly, it's kind of slightly self-indulgent. Yes, we know you're a bookworm. It says it on the book. You don't need to keep banging on. And also, it was kind of odd in a way because, I mean, maybe it is odd. I don't know. She was talking about how odd she was for reading so much, and I was thinking, no, you're not. Didn't we all do that? I don't know. Maybe kids our age didn't read that much. I don't remember that. I just remember reading the books and enjoying them. So anyway, that's just a slight neg on it. But for the most part, an absolutely gorgeous, glorious, wallowing in nostalgia read. Loved it. I've talked before about how my book choices, there's sort of generally a thread, and I'll finish that book and then the next book, there'd be some sort of connection. I mean, the obvious next book to read would be to reread one of my childhood books, but I don't have many of them. Reading that had come off the back of something else, can't even remember what now. But for my next book, it was a total break from that world. Yeah, total break. And I think it was probably also that there was a week or so between books. I didn't do any reading for a week or so. Just trying to get on with other stuff. But yeah, I've been reading quite a bit in the last few days. So, complete different feel. I then went on to read this book, The Wood. John Stuart Collis. It's just a tiny little book, really sweet. Actually, it's the kind of lovely pop it in your knapsack kind of book, isn't it? This had winked at me, as all books do, on the shelves at a charity shop. And I didn't know the writer, John Stuart Collis, but I thought, oh, well, I'm going to love this. I'll explain it in a second, but I thought, oh, that looks like my kind of thing. So I grabbed it. What I didn't realise is this is part of a book, I'll show you now, that I already do have. It's the last section of a book that's full of John Stuart Collis's sort of short essays, really, all about rural life and working in I'll explain more in a second, but it forms part of this book, The Worm Forgives the Plough. Isn't that a gorgeous, gorgeous cover? I really like this artist. This is Angie Lewin, the cover artist. Isn't that beautiful? So it's obviously a more chunky book. So this is, let me try and show you, is, start of the book is this section of the book. So I already had it, silly me. I have this because a friend recommended it ages ago. I found a copy secondhand, grabbed it while I could because the friend who recommended it to me, I trust her judgment, so I thought, yeah, I'll have it. It's been sat on the shelf for ages. Anyway, the rest of it will be read in due course. But this is all, so this is, the writer is an academic and a writer. And during the Second World War, he was put to agricultural work. So in this particular little section, he is clearing and thinning an ash wood. Oh, so lovely. It took me a while to sort of get into his style of writing, purely because I'm going back 70 plus years, and the writing style is so different following on from that Lucy Mangan book. But get into it, I did. How to explain? It's not really. It's all, what comes over more than anything in this is his joy of being outside. And this is why I thought, oh, we're kindred spirits. His joy of being outside is about the joy of being outside, but working. So he talks about, for instance, working in the woods, in the summer especially, really before, when the sun's up, but before the day's getting going, so that by 8 o'clock in the morning, he's already done a chunk of work. And at 8 o'clock he can lie under this particularly favourite tree where the sun does penetrate through the wood and lights up this patch of ground where he can basically bathe his skin in the warmth of the sun. It's so delicious. And all the way through I kept thinking, so this is what was prompting my thinking of yeah, it's that thing of being outside, isn't it? I love to be outside, but I really love it when I'm working. Either working or simply sitting and staring. It kind of leads into the next book as well, this idea of, I've talked about this before at Christmas, how in my family it's traditional to have the Boxing Day walk. Oh, give me strength. I hate the Boxing Day walk. Don't be, let's go for a walk. Let's go for a 6-mile hike, then get back in the car and come home. No, why would I want to do that? Why would I want on a freezing cold, miserable day to go outside, tramp around for 6 miles and then come home? Leave me indoors where it's nice and cosy and I can read a book or chat or watch a movie or anything rather than going for that blimmin' Boxing Day walk. And that got me thinking about how I really don't like going for a walk, but I have to I have to qualify that because I do love walking. I've always walked. I've never driven. And in London, oh my goodness, I abandoned having a bicycle years ago because it's too scary to cycle in London. So I've always walked. I walk everywhere. I didn't used to bat an eyelid, think twice about walking 2 or 3 miles to work. Love it. And even now, or actually sort of remembering, I was staying in a cottage. Oh, I'll tell you this story in more detail one day. But I was staying in a cottage, it's quite remote, and it was winter. We'd packed all sorts of things to take in terms of food, drink, what have you. Forgot to pack any matches. Couldn't start the fire, couldn't make a fire. And the nearest sort of shop, village, what have you, was maybe 2.5 miles away. It doesn't bother me at all to go and walk 2.5 miles to buy a box of matches. Love it. Really enjoy the walk. Enjoy the scenery. Enjoy the sounds and the sights and the smells and all those things. Love it. Get me a box of matches, go back. Brilliant. But the idea of just going for a walk, going nowhere and coming back, what's the point? What is the point? I've never understood it. Never understood it. You know, my sister lives in on the North York Moors, beautiful part of the world, and they're really out. You see, I always think I'm kind of outdoorsy, but I'm outdoorsy in a completely different way. I mean, they're outdoorsy as in they will just go out all day tramping, tramping over hill and dale. I'm like, where are you going? You're just coming home. What's the point? Oh dear, I think maybe I'm too practical about these things. You know, even down at my grandparents', it's like, should we go for a walk? Well, it depends on where we're going. If someone says, should we go for a walk, and it's just a walk in a circle to come back home, no thanks. Should we go for a walk? It's a 5-mile walk, but there's a really fantastic beach at the end of the walk that's great swimming. Yeah, I'm in, count me in. I'll go for a 5-mile walk to find a brilliant beach for a brilliant swim. Anyway, so back to Mr. John. I just felt like, oh yeah, I've got a kindred spirit at last, that it's that thing of loving being outdoors, but with kind of purpose. That's what it boils down to, isn't it? And I think it's why, you know, yeah, okay, I live in London, I don't live in the countryside, I don't live somewhere beautiful, but those hours and hours and hours that I spend in the garden, and sometimes that work is quite brutal on me physically, but I love it. I can't imagine now working indoors again. I mean, obviously I do. If I'm sewing, I do that indoors. You know, and it's like that, back to that Boxing Day walk thing. It's not even a weather, because obviously when I'm in the garden, it's generally, a lot of the work is done in nice weather. But if you said to me on Boxing Day, do you want to come for a walk? The answer is, like, we're going to be out for 6 hours on this walk. Do you want to come with us? My answer is no. But if you said to me, can you go into the garden, Vivi, and chop logs and split logs for 6 hours? Absolutely. I'd love to do that. And while I'm out there, there'll be moments of stillness and I can hear birds, or I can look off into the distance at the view and the hills in the distance and think, oh, what a beautiful lump of rock you are, whatever it is. I can enjoy nature and all the beauty. I just don't need to tramp around in it pointlessly. Have I gone on that point enough? I am sure there are many of you out there who were dragged around on the Boxing Day walk who also hated it, but equally love being outside. So that one naturally led into my next book. And this was a gift from Mandy, who I met up with last summer. Hey Mandy, it was really lovely to meet up. She didn't give it to me on that day, but posted it to me a couple of weeks later and said, I can't believe you haven't read this. And now that I've read it, I can't believe I haven't read it either. It's the slimmest little book. It's called The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd. And it's all about her time in the Cairngorms, which are in Scotland, for those of you who don't know, sort of mountainous area. Now, it's a tiny, tiny little slight book, and there's a whole chunk of it. It's like 2 for the price of 1. Let me show you. This is all introduction by someone else. Now, I know there are people who, if they bought this, they wouldn't bother reading the introduction. I always do. I'm a bit of a nerd like that. If there's an epilogue, an introduction, if it's a prologue, I read the lot. I'll read a bottle of blimmin' juice. I'll read the ingredients on a bottle. But, oh God, I'm sounding like Lucy Mangan now. The introduction, I'm going to come to Nan in a second. The introduction is by Robert Macfarlane. Beautiful, beautifully written. And as I was reading it, I had an appointment the other day and I was in the waiting room for ages. So I'd started it in there. And all the time I was sort of scratching my head thinking, I know Robert Macfarlane, but I can't think of any of his books. Have I read him? Da, da, da. And I know from this introduction that he must be an outdoors writer. He must be a writer about the natural world, mountains, etc. I thought he must be right up my street. Anyway, it turns out, I will get back to Nan in a second, I do have one of his books on my shelf, unread at the moment, and then I also did a quick Google to look at his bibliography. Oh my goodness. Having read his writing in this, I love his writing, and the titles of the books, I'm definitely going to keep a lookout. Not this year, because I'm not allowed to buy any books this year. There's an irony to that too, I'll tell you about in a second. But it turns out, yes, I've got one of his books on my shelf, unread, and this is why I don't need to buy any books. This book was my treats for a tenner, not the one just gone, but the one from the previous year, so the back end of 2000, had to think then. This was in my treats for a tenner before Christmas, and it's called The Old Ways, A Journey on Foot. It says, following the tracks, holloways, drove roads and sea paths that form part of a vast ancient network of routes crisscrossing the British Isles and beyond, Robert Macfarlane discovers a lost world, a landscape of the feet and the mind, oh, love that, a pilgrimage and ritual of stories and ghosts, above all of the places and journeys which inspire and inhabit our imaginations. Heck yeah. So, and this is one of the things I love about reading, is it's obvious that there are certain books which I'm going to be attracted to more than others, but it's amazing how many times one book will link into another and I hadn't even realised there was a connection. So that's what I mean when I picked this up. What a connection. I've already got one of his books on my shelf. So, this isn't in my read soon pile. I've made another pile. Oh, I just want to read them all in one go. Anyway, back to The Living Mountain. Oh my goodness. It's so beautiful. Obviously it's it's incredibly poetic. That kind of really distilled language getting right to the point. The chapters are beautiful. Each chapter has a very specific focus. The water on the mountains, the air, the flora, the fauna, her own senses. And in a way, when I was reading, I was thinking, she writes. What it made me think about was imagining a peregrine falcon high up above a ravine, just hovering there, focusing on the tiniest little mouse right down there in the ravine. So this peregrine falcon is aware of all its surroundings, but its focus is just on that mouse, and then whoosh, down it goes for its supper. And in a way, that's sort of like how Nan's writing is. Where, as I read her, I'm aware of this huge, vast space, this incredibly hostile in some ways space. And she doesn't shy away from talking about that in terms of deaths that have occurred there. So we're aware of this vast space, but at the same time, she brings me through her writing down to the tiniest, tiniest detail. The tiniest bit of lichen clinging to life on a rock, or a moment of, oh, silence, but actually, no, it's never silent on the mountain. Water can be heard somewhere, a flap of a bird's wings somewhere else. It's so focused on these minutiae, but yet we're still in this huge landscape. It's truly beautiful. Absolutely. Oh, I think it could be read and reread. I might read it again. In fact, as I was reading it, sometimes I read some of the paragraphs 2 or 3 times because it was so beautiful. This was gifted to me by Mandy. Thank you, Mandy. And I'm going to gift this on to someone who I think will, really, really love it. I just had a flash then of Robin Wall Kimmerer. Completely different style of writing, but somehow that same purity of appreciation and observation for the natural world. Gorgeous. That book is mentioned in my next book, and it's a complete jump in terms of style of book. Excuse me a second. I'm doing well not coughing though, aren't I? I've got to say though, at night when I lie down, and that's what, I look dreadful at the moment. That's because a serious lack of sleep, but never mind. So I've got my pile of books next to the bed. There's usually sort of 4 or 5 in the pile, and it's my kind of selection of what I'd like to read next. Every now and again, it might get completely swapped out because I'll read a book like The Nan Shepherd, and then I think, I'll blow the selection I've made, put those back on the shelf, and for instance, having read that, a natural progression would then be the Robert Macfarlane. That's not happening at this time though. So yes, I've got my little selection there, and I was about to get stuck into my next book when the postman arrived. Oh, Jan, you are naughty. I have the most wonderful friends, I have to say. So like I was just saying, in terms of I'm not buying any books this year. Keep being sent books. Now stop it, you lot. Stop sending. I mean this, personal friends as well. Jan has sent me Confessions of a Bookseller. Now, do you remember last year I was sent Diary of a Bookseller, and it sat on my shelves for ages, and then I finally got around to reading it. I think, was it one of the ones I read in December? I seem to remember in December I was spending so much of my reading time in France, either on a barge or cycling around France, tasting food. All those books, by the way, my French ones, I've given those to Paul. He'll like those. Anyway, I loved Diary of a Bookseller, and I was saying by the end of it I was completely in love with Sean, the bookshop owner and the writer of the book, completely in love with all the characters, the bookshop, and after I finished it I really missed them all. So thank you, Jan, sent me this. It arrived about, 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's just been in this last few days when I've been really quite low. I think a lot of the lowness is just not sleeping. But anyway, I'd done a few little bits and bobs that morning, managed a few things, just felt utterly wiped out, and to be honest, feeling miserable. I'm just sick of feeling sick. So I opened the parcel, this came out, and I thought, I'll just sit on the sofa a minute and I'll just read the first couple of pages. I scoffed it all in one go. Aren't I a greedy pig? All in one sitting, gone. It's great. If any of you who've read The Diary of a Bookseller, is it Diary of a Bookseller or Diary of a Bookshop? It's over on the shelf, can't remember. And really enjoyed it. Oh my goodness, I highly recommend Confessions. It carries on in the same vein. And of course, for me, in my book selling days, all those memories flooding back of blooming awkward customers, people asking stupid questions. You know, people say, oh, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Yeah, there are. There are stupid questions. Shut up. Look, loved it. Highly recommend it. And and Jan, my friend who, what was lovely is Jan doesn't live in the UK. She lives over in the States. She'd been listening to it, I think, as a talking book. We were just messaging the other day because she was saying, how are you? And I messaged back. I said, oh, I'm just feeling fed up. And she said, I've ordered you a book. I was like, no, you shouldn't. Anyway, she did. But rather than ordering from Amazon and all that nonsense, she ordered it direct from Sean's shop, which is in Wigtown in Scotland. Ordered direct from him at his shop. And look, signed. How sweet. It says come direct from... So he's made the money, not Amazon, which is brilliant. But the reason I was mentioning that is I wondered after I'd read the first one, would this only appeal to someone who's been in the book trade? Anyway, Jan's never been in the book trade. She's loved them. So I think for a really fun, it's dead easy read. It's not going to challenge you intellectually at all. But the characters are so vivid. It's kind of like, I feel like I'm just gossiping with old pals when I read it. So I finished it and I'm missing it all already. That's what I mean. It's like, I kind of want to write to Sean Bithell, the owner of the shop and the writer of the books, to say, can you produce one of these books every single week? I hear about people, what's it called, binge watching a box set, where you get a box set of, I don't know, The West Wing. God, that's how out of touch I am. And you end up watching The West Wing for 12 hours in one day. Just watch back-to-back episodes. Well, that's how it was for me reading that. I binged. It wasn't 12 hours, but yeah, I could, oh my God, the fantasy, this is my fantasy life now, is I end up with a rich benefactor. I end up with my very own Magwitch, and I'm paid to stay at home and read. Imagine it. So I loved it. Anyway, that's where I've got to. I've got my next lot set up, but I just want to fit. I am going to have a cough, sorry. That's better. So, I start talking about, but this is going to be a long one. I want to tell you a story. And it's sort of prompted by Judy. Thank you very much. Judy sent me some linens and tucked in with it Lawrence van der Post's Venture to the Interior. Crazily, I've never read this. I have probably sold this book hundreds of times over in my days as a book dealer. Hundreds of times as this particular paperback edition, and on a few occasions as a first edition. So it's like, oh, great, I actually didn't read it. The reason I was mentioning that, I haven't read it, yeah, there's a lot of books out there, Vivi. One of my biggest areas of reading over the years has been sort of travel, exploration. Obviously, you know about all the sort of the mountaineering. Oh, and just to say about the Nan Shepherd, what's lovely is to read a mountain book that's not about the sport of mountaineering, but about the appreciation of the mountains. So yeah, there's a lot of books on my shelves that have been mountaineering, Arctic, Antarctic, polar exploration in general, Northwest Passage, that, but all sorts of, you see, travel's not really the right word, exploration is probably a better word. So for instance, I went through a phase, and it ties in with this, I went through a phase of reading anything and everything I could lay my hands on to do with the Pacific Islands. oh yeah, it's just, I mean, I can't even remember. I can't remember half the title. I probably can't remember 90% of the titles I've read over the years. But, for example, a lot of you will probably have heard of the Kon-Tiki expedition. I believe it was a TV series as well, written by, it's Thor Heyerdahl. Is he Norwegian? I think he's Norwegian. Yeah, so Kon-Tiki expedition, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. So that's the kind of thing once upon a time I was reading. So yeah, I've read travel/exploration voraciously over the years. So back in my bookshop days, I mean, I'm quite organised anyway. I used to have my bookshelves really highly organised and had quite a big travel section. Now, in the shop, just picture your typical antiquarian bookshop, shelves to the ceiling, just shelves everywhere. And then where my desk was, where the till was, where I'd serve people, what have you, behind me there are more shelves with slightly more expensive things on. And then next to me here, the locked cabinets where more expensive things are, and then completely locked away, not for handling, the really, really expensive stuff, which is all done via catalogue sales. So we'd send catalogues out to our customers, stop things being handled and, mucked up. Anyway, so in the travel section, I had it highly organised. So it would be, and I'm not talking travel as in, guidebooks like your Lonely Planet guide book, Lonely Planet Guide to France, Lonely Planet Guide to Paris, not that kind of thing. This sort of travel writing. So I had it organised by continent, and then within the continent, so I'd have a big section for Europe, and then it was organised by the countries within Europe. Same for Africa, same for whatever. And because I was quite a nerd about the Pacific Islands, I even had that section organised by island groups, whether it was Micronesia or, I can't even remember all of them now, but all the different Kiribati, all the different island groups, so they'd be super organised. Just makes it easier to find things. Now, in those days, the bookshop used to close at 10:30 at night. I know, ridiculous. So what I used to like to do, and it was open 7 days a week, I would always work one of the weekend days, usually Sunday. I'd be there on my own. But what that meant was, rather than having one of my part-timers in on the Sunday, if someone brings some books to the shop on a Sunday they want to sell, my part-timer can't buy them. So they're just left, or they're taken away, If I'm working the Sunday shift, great. Someone wants to sell some books, I can look through them, decide what I want to buy, make them an offer, get it done and dusted. Likewise with the evenings. So I always worked 1, sometimes 2 evenings a week as well, so until 10:30. And the rest of my staff would leave at sort of 6 by 6:30 or so. So I'd have these 4 hours in the shop on my own in the evening. Great, I can do some cataloguing, I can make sure the shelves are tidy, what have you. But generally by about 8:30 in the evening, you know what, I've done as much as I can do without being in my office and being on the computer. So quite often I would, if there's no one in the shop, I'd get out a book and I'd be reading. I didn't let my part-timers do it, of course not. Obviously, the minute someone comes into the shop, I'm going to put that away. Or at least as they come into the shop, as soon as someone comes in, I'll say, "Oh, good evening, how are you?" Not too much in their face. They might be a quiet person, they may not want interaction, but just acknowledge them, let them know that I've seen them, you're welcome, So there was one evening where I was actually reading, what's it called, Fatu Hiva by Thor Heyerdahl, hence mentioning Kon-Tiki. I was reading Fatu Hiva, which I think, if I remember correctly, was his first book. It had a different title. It didn't do anything by way of sales. It kind of disappeared. Then Kon-Tiki came out, and it made him, overnight, huge. So then the Fatu Hiva was reissued with the new name of Fatu Hiva. So I was reading that. It was really gripping. Oh my goodness, scary towards the end. But anyway, so this gentleman had come in, good evening, elderly chap, really hat on, proper old gent. I don't know, he must have been in his 80s or so. And I'd done my initial greeting, so he's sort of wandering around the shop. It's on 2 floors, there's a big basement as well. I can see the whole shop from the desk, because all the shelves in the middle are sort of half-size shelves, so I can see over them. I can see, he's happy browsing. I'm going to tuck my nose back in my books. I carry on reading a bit. And then he sort of came over to the counter. Sorry, itchy eye. He came over to the counter and he said, can you point me in the direction of your travel books? So I said, yes, of course. They're over here. I very quickly explained we've got, by continent. I said, there's also a handful over here, and I've got some first edition bits and pieces, depends what you're looking for. He said, thank you, I'll have a browse. What are you reading? I said, Fatu Hiva, Tor Heyerdahl. I said, actually, I'm a bit of a travel writing fan myself. So we got chatting, and it's one of my joys of the bookshop. It's like my 2 worlds, my 2 perfect worlds, books and people. And like I say, some people coming into a bookshop, they don't want to chat, that's fine. Some do, and it's lovely. I used to get so many recommendations. Try this, try that. But I used to love it when I could give my recommendations too. So this gentleman, he'd gone back over towards the travel bookcase and was looking. It's only about 2 metres from where I'm sitting, 2-3 metres. Chatting about Tor Heyerdahl. Is it Thor or Tor? I think it's Tor. Anyway, so he said to me, what would you recommend? Who is your favourite travel writer? I didn't even have to think. I said, Patrick Leigh Fermor. You must try. If you've never read Patrick Leigh Fermor, you must. I said, I've got loads over here, and I showed him the section in the regular travel section. We had a combination of paperbacks and some hardbacks of his books. And of those, he said, which one would you recommend? And I said, the Manie is my absolute favourite. It's so beautiful. So we're chatting away, and he was saying, what is it you like about it in particular? And I said, I like Greece, but also the guy is just a sublime writer. You can tell that Patrick Leigh Fermor is an incredibly eclectic, erudite, is so learned as a person. When you read one of these books, it's almost like reading an encyclopedia, although it doesn't feel like I'm having that dictated to me. I just feel like, oh my goodness, there's so much in here. I'm learning, and I'm on an adventure. Anyway, so he said, that sounds interesting. And then I said, and if you like, and I sort of swiveled around and I said, I've got a couple of his first editions over here. They're signed, so they're a bit expensive. So he came over to have a look. I was like, they're quite expensive, aren't they? I said, to be honest, I really don't want you to buy them, because I want to buy them at the end of the month if I've got enough pay left. I used to have we all had a book allowance. We were all allowed to have a certain number of, let's say it's like £100 book allowance per month. So I used to, I could either have 10 really great books, yay, or 20 paperbacks, or 1 really, really good book. So I'd had my eye on these signed editions for ages. But we'd had them on the shelf about 2 months. Anyway, so I pointed them out to him, and then I joked saying, I don't really want you to buy them because I want them for myself. And he sort of laughed a bit, Anyway, he went back and he was browsing, and he carried on browsing, and it all went a bit quiet. She's like, okay, I'm going to read my book, leave him in peace to do his browsing. And half an hour or so passed, and he came over to the desk with a stack of books. They were all travel, they were quite a mix, but amongst them were 2 of the Patrick Leigh Fermor books I pointed out on the back shelves that were signed, but he'd picked up the ones from the regular shelves which weren't signed. They were first editions, so they were still a bit pricey, but they weren't signed. So I started going through, totting up, ringing it all through the till. And some of the more expensive books, like first editions, we used to write down, keep a record. And I was going, oh, good choice. Yeah, that's a great choice. I'm going through it all like this. And as I'm sort of ringing things up and writing them in the book, he said, oh, it's been so great chatting to you. He said, what's your name, by the way? And I said, oh, hi, I'm Vivi. Nice to meet you. Put my head back down. I'm carrying on writing. He said, I'm Patrick. And I said, Patrick, it's really nice to meet you. Carry on writing. It's going to make me get all funny. So I rang it all up, put it all into a bag for him, and he went, oh, hang on. And he pulled out the 2 Patrick Leigh Fermor first editions, put them on the counter, got out a pen, and wrote on the inside cover. I was like, what are you doing? You've guessed it, haven't you? I'm going to get all emotional. It was Patrick Leigh Fermor. The old man was Patrick Leigh Fermor, my absolute hero, travel writer. Oh, control yourself, Vivi. It was him. So he signed them and he pushed them across the desk and he said, they're for you. I was like, what? He said, well, no, you don't have to buy those. There you go. It's like, what? I was dumbfounded. Now, I should just say, I'm not the kind of person who gets starstruck in terms of, a lot of my clients in those days were Hollywood A-listers. I mean, like off the chart A-listers. Never ever starstruck by any of them. To me, they're just people, they're just actors, acting is just a job. I mean, basically, you're a dummy moving around a set saying words that someone else has written, not starstruck at all. Writers, my writing heroes, well, that's a whole different ball game. That's a talent I can't imagine ever having. I was utterly, what? And he was so sweet. He doesn't live in the UK. He's died now. I mean, he's really old by then anyway. But anyway, he just said, he said, you just thrilled me. He said, how old was I at the time? Hang on a minute, let's go back. So this must have been about early 2000s. So in my early 30s, was I? Mid-30s? Anyway, he called me young. He said that I'd thrilled him that a young person was so into his writing, into these books which he'd written decades before, that a young person loved them so much. He said just the fact that, he said, I asked you to recommend me travel writing and the one writer you wanted me to read was me. Isn't that a joy? Isn't that an absolute joy? What a memory. That's proper. Oh, it's proper cheered me up just remembering it. Anyway, so that all stemmed, thank you, Judy, from you sending that. And like I said, it's a book I sold over and over again in my book, Buying and Selling Days. It actually somehow missed my radar, as in me reading it. But yeah, that memory of meeting the one and only Patrick Leigh Fermor will stay with me till the day I die. Oh, in fact, he's what I sold everything subsequently. Yeah, I needed to fund things, but it's one of those writers I think I would reread. So not this year because I'm not buying, but maybe next year, maybe once I've moved house, I can, if I see his work in paperback, I'll pick them up again and give them a reread. If any of you haven't read him, I highly recommend. Right, this is all going again, I can feel it, so I'm going to wrap it up there for today. I had thought I wouldn't even put a video out at the end of this week, but this has been a nice gentle time actually. Books, reading, talking about them, memories of the bookshop, it's all a joy and it's not taxing for me, so yeah, why not pop a little video out this week. I think it's been a long one, hasn't it? Hey ho. So on that note, I shall love you and leave you. I'll probably see you in a couple of days for the end of month catch up, round up, and then, fingers firmly crossed, This is not going to be resolved overnight. I'm not, I've talked to the doctor about this. I'm not going to be back to myself anytime quickly. Apparently this is going to take quite some time, but hopefully as we go into February, I can start to gently get back to the garden, gently get back to other things. And when I do, I will be sure to bring you along with me. Until then, please look after yourselves. Happy reading. Get down to your local second-hand place, wherever it is, your local bookshop, and go and check out Patrick Leigh Fermor. What a gent. Cheerio, everyone.